The galaxy was vast, filled with millions of stars, empires, and ancient civilizations. The Galactic Empire believed it ruled them all. Its fleets stretched across countless systems, its banners planted on worlds both rich and poor. No frontier seemed too far, no enemy too strong. Yet at the very edges of known space there was a region the Empire rarely touched, a silent place, filled with dead worlds and cold stars. The maps marked it only with a single phrase: Terran space. Off limits. For centuries most had forgotten the meaning behind those words. Scholars dismissed them as the remains of old human colonies long extinct. The young officers of the Empire laughed whenever the warning was mentioned. To them, humanity was nothing but a faded story, a primitive race lost in history. No power, no fleets, no claim worth respecting. And so when the Empire's expansion reached the edge of Terran borders, the admirals gave the order to cross. But before the first ship entered, something strange happened. A beacon lit up in the void. It had been silent for centuries, its shell covered in dust and frozen rock. Suddenly, its lights burned with fire again and its signal spread across the stars. Every Imperial ship in range picked it up. At first they thought it was an automated distress call, some old machine breaking down. But when they decoded the message, the bridge crews grew uneasy. The signal was not broken. It was not damaged. It was clear, strong, and simple. Terran space is off limits. Trespass and you will not return. Silence fell across the command decks. Officers exchanged nervous looks, unsure if they should laugh or take it seriously. The fleet admiral smirked and dismissed it as nothing but a trick. Old code. Ancient propaganda. Humans are gone. Their threats mean nothing. His words spread across the fleet, but in the hearts of the younger soldiers, doubt remained. For days, the beacon continued its broadcast. It echoed through every channel, reaching far beyond the border, carried on the silent winds of space. Civilian traders heard it, explorers heard it, even the spies of other empires heard it, and soon, whispers began to rise again. Humans were not extinct. They were watching. Inside the fleet, the mood shifted. The engineers noticed their instruments reacting strangely. Sensors showed phantom signals, shadows of massive ships moving in the darkness, always just out of sight. At first, they thought it was interference, but the patterns were too precise. Something was there. Something was following them. On one of the smaller Imperial destroyers, a young lieutenant sat staring at his console. The ghost signals kept reappearing, larger each time. He reported it to his captain, but the man only laughed. Scare stories. The galaxy is full of empty warnings. Humans are weak. The Empire has nothing to fear. Yet that night, when the lieutenant looked through the viewing glass, he swore he saw something in the distance. A silhouette, too big, too silent, vanished. Into the stars. The admiral ordered the beacon destroyed. Fighters flew out and blasted it apart, scattering burning fragments into the void. But even as it died, the signal did not fade. From somewhere deeper in the borderlands, another beacon came alive. Then another, and another. One by one, forgotten. Machines woke, sending the same message across the night. Terran space is off limits. Trespass and you will not return. Now the soldiers whispered openly. Some remembered childhood tales of the Terrans, warriors who once fought entire coalitions and won. Others told darker stories of ships that vanished when they dared to cross the line. None of these were written in the Empire's history books, but in the shadows of the barracks those stories returned. Fear began to spread, quiet but unstoppable. The admiral grew angry. He called the fears of his men weakness, the whispers of children. Standing before his officers, he raised his voice. The Terrans are a myth, a dead race. If they truly existed, they would have shown themselves centuries ago. This is nothing but broken machines and empty warnings. We will move forward, and we will take what we want. His words were strong, but his eyes betrayed him. Even he felt the weight of the message. Even he could not deny the way the signals seemed alive. As if someone somewhere was watching, waiting. As the fleet prepared to cross deeper into Terran space, the stars around them seemed to grow colder. Long-range scanners flickered with static. Engines throbbed with unease, as, though the very fabric of space resisted their advance, the soldiers held their breath, praying the stories were wrong. One young officer whispered as he stared into the dark. What if the warning is real? What if they're still here? His voice was barely a breath, but it carried the fear of many. And then, the final moment came. The lead ship broke the invisible line, engines roaring as it entered the first system within Terran territory. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The crew exhaled. Some even laughed. Perhaps the Admiral had been right all along. Perhaps it was. Only fear and shadows. But then, every screen, every console, every comm channel across the fleet went black. A single phrase appeared, burning bright in ancient Terran code. You were warned. The void itself seemed to hold its breath. The Imperial fleet had crossed the line. And humanity had answered. The void was never truly empty. Even when the scanners showed nothing but stars, the soldiers of the Galactic Empire felt something else. A pressure in the air, a weight on their shoulders. The warning had been clear. The phrase burned in their minds. You were warned. Yet still the Admiral pressed forward. Retreat would mean weakness, and weakness was something the Empire never allowed. The fleet moved into the first Terran system. Once, long ago, it had been home to great cities, vast stations, and living worlds. Now, the planets were dead, burned to ash, their surfaces scarred by ancient wars. The Empire's historians claimed humans destroyed themselves, fighting until their own homes collapsed. A violent race, the scholars said, a doomed species. The soldiers whispered a different thought. What if those scars were not self-inflicted? What if they were victories? The mining crews began their work quickly. Vast machines drilled into the crust of barren moons, pulling out rare metals the Empire hungered for. Cargo freighters lined up, loading minerals to send back to the core worlds. For 2 days, nothing happened. The crews laughed at their own fear. The admirals celebrated, convinced they had proven the warnings false. See, the officers boasted. The Terrans are gone. They are nothing but dust. But the silence was not safety. It was patience. On the third night, one of the mining freighters failed to report. Its signal went dark, cut off mid-sentence. At first, command blamed equipment failure. The admiral ordered another ship to investigate. That second ship also vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, just silence. Panic rippled through the ranks. Patrols were sent out. Destroyers swept the void. But all they found were faint trails of energy. Too clean, too sharp, too deliberate. As if something had erased the freighters completely. When the engineers studied the readings, they found something chilling. The traces matched Terran technology. Old, yes, but precise. Too precise. The admiral called it sabotage. Rogue pirates, nothing more, he declared. But his words carried less weight now. The crews were no longer laughing. They spoke in hushed voices, trading stories. Some claimed to hear voices in the static of their comms, whispers in a language they didn't know. Others swore they saw shadows moving across their viewing screens, shapes too massive to be asteroids. One navigator wept openly, begging to leave before it was too late. That night, an entire squadron disappeared. 6 destroyers patrolling the far side of the system reported movement on their sensors. A flash of light. A formation of unknown contacts. Then silence. Their transmissions ended mid-breath, cut like a blade through the throat. By the time reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left but drifting debris, fragments melted, twisted, and charred. And among the wreckage, the crews found something that froze their blood. A black hull plate, marked with an ancient symbol. A clawed hand gripping a star. The Terran emblem. The admiral tried to keep it hidden, but word spread like fire. Soldiers stared at the emblem, some in fear, others in awe. The whispers grew into conviction. The Terrans were alive. And they were angry. The admiral doubled the fleet's defenses. Gun batteries were armed, fighters launched constant patrols, and sensor nets covered every approach. But no matter how tight the net, the enemy slipped through. A fuel depot exploded. A communications tower was cut in half. A carrier found half its crew missing, vanished without a trace. Every act was swift, silent, and merciless. Not war, punishment. By the 5th day, morale was broken. Soldiers refused to sleep, fearing they would not wake. Entire platoons muttered, prayers to gods long forgotten. Even the officers carried the weight of dread. The fleet was not fighting shadows anymore. It was being hunted. The turning point came with the loss of the dreadnought Imperious Dawn. The pride of the fleet, its cannons could burn a city to glass with a single shot. It was invincible, or so they thought. The crew woke to alarms, every deck shaking. Sensors showed nothing. Then from the dark came a single blast of energy. Not plasma, not railgun fire. Something older, something stronger. In one strike, the Imperious Dawn cracked in half. Thousands died before anyone could respond. The survivors spoke of a silhouette, a vast shadow moving through the stars, larger than any Imperial ship, silent as death, watching. The admiral could no longer deny it. The warnings were real. The Terrans were here, and they were not forgiving. Yet he could not retreat. His pride, his honor, and his fear of Imperial judgment chained him to his course. He stood before his men, voice hard, though his eyes betrayed his terror. "We will not bow to ghosts," he said. "We are the Empire. We will not yield." But in the dark corners of the fleet, the truth spread like poison. These were not ghosts. These were hunters. Ancient warriors who had waited watching until someone dared to break their command. And now the hunters were awake. Every soldier in the fleet knew it in their bones. The warning had not been a bluff. It had been a promise. And the promise was being kept. The Empire's fleet was breaking apart, not from battle, but from fear. For days they had been stalked by shadows. Ships vanished without screams, soldiers disappeared without alarms, and wreckage floated through the void like silent tombs. The men and women of the fleet no longer laughed. They whispered. They prayed. They stared into the darkness, waiting for the next strike. And then, on the edge of a dying star system, humanity revealed itself. It began with silence. Every Imperial ship system went dark. Sensors, comms, navigation. Even the lights flickered, plunging the decks into gloom. The fleet drifted blind, cut off from each other, floating helpless in the void. Then, without warning, the screens came back to life. Every console, every display, every holo showed the same thing. A message written in ancient Terran code. "You were warned." The words pulsed once, then vanished. In their place, the stars lit up. One by one, shapes emerged from the darkness. Massive vessels, black as obsidian, slid out of hiding. At first, the Empire's officers thought they were asteroids. But then the ships moved, silent and deliberate. They were unlike anything the Empire had seen before. No shining banners, no polished hulls. These ships were scarred, armored in thick plating, bristling with weapons the scanners could not even identify. They looked old, ancient even, but their presence carried weight. Power, authority. The first warship glided past the Imperial flagship, its shadow swallowing the light. It bore no name, no insignia, only the clawed hand emblem of Terran command. Its engines burned with a cold blue fire, silent and steady. Behind it more ships appeared. Dozens, hundreds. An entire fleet hidden in the graveyard of dead worlds. They had been waiting. Patient, silent, watching. And now, they were awake. The Imperial Admiral froze. His lips parted, but no words came. Around him, his crew stared in horror. One officer whispered, voice trembling, "They're not extinct. They never were. The Terran flagship opened a channel. No face appeared, no voice, only a single transmission that echoed across every Imperial ship. Terran space is off limits. Leave now. Or be destroyed. The Admiral's pride flared. Even as his heart pounded, he refused to bend. They are relics, he spat. Old machines, nothing more. He ordered the fleet to attack. The Empire's warships opened fire. Plasma lances streaked across the void. Railguns thundered. Missiles streaked through the stars. For a moment, the dark was filled with light. But when the fire faded, the Terran ships still stood. Their shields shimmered, absorbing the full fury of the Imperial Armada. Then slowly they answered. The first shot came from a Terran dreadnought. A single beam of white light tore through an Imperial cruiser, splitting it cleanly in two. No explosion, no fire, just silence, then wreckage drifting apart. Another Terran ship fired, unleashing a storm of kinetic slugs that ripped through a destroyer squadron as though the ships were made of paper. Within minutes, half the attacking fleet was gone. The Empire's formations broke. Captains screamed for retreat, but their comms were jammed. The Terran ships advanced in perfect silence, their weapons precise, merciless. They did not waste shots. They did not chase fleeing vessels. Every strike was deliberate, surgical, terrifying. It was not war, it was judgment. On one Imperial battleship, a young ensign stared at the viewing glass, eyes wide. They're not fighting to win, she whispered. They're fighting to remind us. Her captain asked, remind us of what? The ensign's voice was barely audible. That we were warned. The Admiral's flagship shuddered under impact. A Terran warship had locked onto it, its weapons glowing with cold light. The Admiral finally broke. Pride collapsed into terror. He screamed orders for retreat, for surrender, for anything to save his fleet. But it was too late. The Terran flagship transmitted one last message. You chose this. Then the void lit up. A wall of energy erupted from the Terran fleet, sweeping across the battlefield. Imperial ships crumbled under the blast, hulls torn open, engines silenced. In minutes, the great armada of the Galactic Empire was reduced to scattered wreckage, burning silently in the void. Only a few ships survived, fleeing into hyperspace, their engines screaming as they escaped. They would carry stories back to the Empire, stories of shadows, of ships scarred by ancient wars, of humanity reborn as wrath itself. The survivors spoke of eyes watching from the darkness, of a fleet that seemed endless, waiting just beyond the stars. They spoke of a power that was not supposed to exist, and they spoke of the warning, always the warning. The Terrans did not pursue the survivors. They did not conquer, did not invade. They simply vanished again into the dark, their ships sliding back into silence. Only wreckage remained, drifting as a reminder. A warning carved. In fire and metal. Across the galaxy, rumors spread. Traitors, smugglers, spies, all carried tales of the lost warships of Earth, of humans who had hidden themselves away, building weapons beyond imagination. Empires laughed at first. But when the survivors returned with evidence, burned hulls, twisted wreckage, the Terran emblem, the laughter died. The galaxy understood one truth. The Terrans had returned, and they were not merciful. The Galactic Empire could not accept defeat. Pride was its blood, arrogance its armor. When the broken survivors returned with tales of Terran warships and impossible weapons, the Emperor himself refused to believe. Lies, he declared. Exaggerations of cowards. But the wreckage told another story. Imperial hulls torn apart by weapons no one had ever seen. Blackened fragments of fleets that should have been invincible. The truth spread too fast to hide. The Terrans were alive. And they had made their warning real. The Empire answered with fury. From every sector, fleets were summoned. Dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, more ships than most civilizations had ever seen in their entire history. The skies above the Imperial capital swarmed with vessels, an armada so vast it dimmed the stars. Millions of soldiers boarded, carrying the pride of the Empire on their shoulders. They swore this would not be a war of shadows. This would be a war of fire, crushing the Terrans once and for all. Whispers of fear still lingered, but the admirals silenced them with speeches. They are old. They are few. They hide because they are weak. Against the might of the Empire, no race can stand. And so, with banners raised high, the Grand Armada entered Terran space. At first, there was silence. No warnings. No attacks. The fleets advanced, their sensors stretched to the limit. The admirals grew bold again, convinced that the Terrans had run. They cannot face us, they said. They flee like vermin. But the soldiers remembered the shadows. They remembered the emblem. They remembered the voice that had promised destruction. And then, the Terrans struck. It began in the asteroid fields. Imperial scouts reported strange readings, then screamed as massive engines lit up around them. Whole asteroids moved, not rocks, but Terran war machines, hidden and disguised. Weapons unfolded from their hulls, firing with merciless precision. The scouts vanished in fire before the main fleet even knew what had happened. Then came the ambushes. In the icy rings of shattered planets, Terran destroyers emerged, cloaked by the silence of space. They darted through the Imperial lines like predators, cutting supply ships apart, crippling engines, vanishing before counterfire could land. Every attack was perfect, every strike deliberate. It was as if the Terrans knew every move before the Empire made it. The admirals tried to adapt, forming tighter formations, sending larger patrols, but the Terrans only changed tactics. They turned gravity itself into a weapon, pulling Imperial ships into traps with hidden singularity devices. They unleashed swarms of drones that slipped past defenses, tearing through vulnerable systems from within. No strategy worked. Every adjustment ended in more losses. Still, the Empire pressed on. They were too proud to retreat. They sent wave after wave of ships, believing sheer numbers would crush the enemy. But numbers meant nothing. For every 100 Imperial vessels, a single Terran warship rose to meet them. And that one was enough. In one battle near the shattered world of Karthos, an entire Imperial carrier group faced a single Terran dreadnought. The dreadnought did not move. It simply opened fire. Minutes later, the carrier group was gone. Thousands of lives ended in silence, erased by a machine that fought with the calm of a god. Survivors fled, but the message was clear. There was no safe number, no safe strength against the wrath of Terrans. The soldiers began to lose faith. They looked to their commanders, but even the admirals grew pale. One captain, once proud, whispered to his crew, "We are not fighting men. We are fighting monsters of steel and fire." Another muttered, "No. They are not monsters. They are the humans of legend. They are warriors who never forgive." The Empire's great offensive slowed. Fear spread like infection. Every system they entered felt colder, emptier, as if the stars themselves refused their presence. And always, the same words haunted them. You were warned. The Terrans did not seek conquest. They did not burn cities or enslave worlds. Their fury was aimed only at those who crossed the line. They hunted fleets, shattered armies, erased trespassers, and with every victory they spoke the same truth. Terran space was forbidden. The Emperor grew desperate. He ordered his armada deeper still, toward the heart of Terran territory. "If they hide, we will drag them into the light," he thundered. But his words no longer carried strength. In the eyes of his soldiers, the Emperor looked like a child shouting at a storm. For deep inside Terran space, something greater waited. Reports trickled in. Vast structures orbiting dead stars, superweapons, harnessing black holes, ships larger than moons. The Terrans had not been idle in their silence. They had been preparing, building, waiting for the day when the galaxy's arrogance would test their patience. That day had come. And now, the wrath of humanity was awake in full. When the Imperial fleets reached the threshold of those hidden strongholds, they finally understood. This was not war. This was punishment. The Terrans had allowed them to come this far only to show them the scale of their mistake. And somewhere, deep in the black, a voice rose once more across the comms of every Imperial ship. Calm, cold, final. You were warned. Now you will learn. Wrath of Terrans was no longer hidden. It was here. Asterisk. The Emperor's Grand Armada entered the black heart of Terran space and found silence waiting. No stars shone here. The void was thick, heavy, as if the universe itself held its breath. The Empire's fleet spread wide, their lights glowing against the darkness. Millions of soldiers stood ready, weapons primed, hearts pounding. But inside, every man and woman felt the same fear. They had gone too far. And then, the stars came. Alive. From the void they emerged, sovereign-class Terran warships. They were larger than any Imperial dreadnought, their black hulls stretching like floating cities, scarred from ancient battles yet radiating raw power. Their engines glowed with cold blue fire, their cannons as vast as mountains. They did not come in silence this time. They came in formation, countless in number, a fleet so massive it blotted out the heavens. Humanity had not shown its full strength before. Now it revealed everything. The Imperial crews froze, their voices cracking with terror. One whispered, "This is not a fleet. This is a judgment." Another trembled. They were never gone. They were waiting. The admirals barked orders, but their voices faltered. Even the Emperor's command felt small, like a child screaming into a storm. The Terran flagship opened a channel. For the first time, a voice was heard. It was calm, steady, without hate, but filled with unshakable authority. "You crossed the line. You ignored the warning. Now you will face the lesson." And then the sky exploded. The sovereigns opened fire, beams of white light, storms of kinetic slugs, waves of energy that tore through space itself. The Imperial Armada shattered under the first strike. Carriers crumbled, dreadnoughts split apart, cruisers burned like paper in a furnace. The battle was no battle, it was slaughter. The Terrans fought with precision, every shot crushing hundreds, every move flawless. The Empire's vast numbers meant nothing. Their weapons bounced harmlessly against Terran shields. Their formations collapsed before they could even regroup. The Emperor watched in silence as ship after ship was torn apart. His pride, his power, his entire armada, the greatest in the galaxy, was being destroyed in minutes. His voice broke as he screamed for retreat, but there was no retreat. Every hyperspace route was blocked. The Terrans had sealed the battlefield like a cage. There was no escape. The soldiers of the Empire finally understood. The warnings were not superstition. The silence of Terran space was not emptiness. It had been preparation, patience. Humanity had waited for centuries, not to conquer, but to make sure the galaxy remembered one law. Terran space was forbidden. One by one, the Imperial ships fell. Fire consumed them, debris scattered into the void. Screams echoed across dying channels, cut short by silence. In the heart of the slaughter, the Emperor's flagship shuddered as the Terran sovereign locked onto it. The Emperor fell to his knees, begging, pleading. His voice reached no one. The Terran voice returned, calm and merciless. "This is your lesson. Strength is not yours to claim. Terran space is off limits. Forever." And then the flagship was gone, consumed in a burst of white light. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. Silence returned, broken only by the drifting wreckage of what had once been the greatest armada in the galaxy. The Terran fleet stood unchallenged, their shadows stretching across the void. But they did not advance. They did not claim territory or demand tribute. They simply turned away, retreating into the darkness as though nothing had happened. The survivors, few, broken, trembling, were left to crawl back to the galaxy. They carried no trophies, only fear. And when they spoke, their words spread across every world, every empire, every council. They spoke of the sovereigns, of the voice that had passed judgment, of the wrath that no power could stand against. They spoke of the final lesson. Humanity does not forgive trespass. From that day on, Every map of the galaxy carried the same mark. Around the border of Terran space, in bold and unchallenged letters, the warning was carved for all to see. Do not enter. Terran space is off limits, and none dared to cross again. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The wrath of humanity was not a myth. It was real, it was eternal, and it was watching.